Anuja Chandramoli. Ma'am, thank you for coming here, Anuja. Today we want to talk about the Mahabharata, and the star obviously everybody knows is Arjuna.
So we have this history of sons murdering their fathers, fathers killing their sons, all for a throne. But Arjuna was above that. I will destroy the world. A world without my friend will not be allowed to survive. So that is the measure of his love for Arjuna. Krishna is truth. Krishna was born for a purpose to make the events happen of this great war, and Arjuna was born to assist him because the friends always do these things together.
You gotta tell the story of Swetaketu. It's so interesting.
Shvetaketu's story is a sage releases his semen and he gathers it in a pot. And from this pot, Dronacharya was born. One of the ugliest, darkest chapters in the Mahabharata. Little toxic relationship Drona had with Drupada. Drupada had been humiliated by none other than Drona's star pupil Arjuna. Then and today, a lot of people can't wrap their head around the fact that one woman had 5 husbands. Polyandry and polygamy were very common back in the day. Foul means were used. It was Drona who gave the idea for killing Abhimanyu. Drona killed all of, a lot of Panchalas were slain by Drona, including Drishtadyumna's children. That was the most of all the disgusting things that happened in Kurukshetra. This was the worst.
Arjun is the greatest warrior that this land has ever seen. And in this podcast, I have had the opportunity to sit with Miss Anuja Chandramoli, who is a prolific author. She has written about 14 books in 13 years, which is fantastic. In this podcast, we talked about Mahabharata from the point of view of Arjun. And I was blown away. If you are interested in podcasts like this, if you are interested in Indian history, I wouldn't call it mythology, then this podcast is a must watch for you. I hope you enjoy it. Anuja Chandramoli, ma'am, thank you for coming here, Anuja. Um, it is an absolute pleasure for me because after reading your books, not all of them yet, because they are heavy, I am so looking forward to this conversation. First of all, does it feel to be in the Pink City?
Deepan, I can't thank you enough for having me over. I'm having the time of my life in Jaipur. Now the city now owns a piece of my heart, and I kid you not, because I adore how much effort has been put to preserve its heritage value, and it's so pretty, and the food is to die for.
Mm.
So Jaipur has my heart, and I'm delighted to experience it in all its flavors.
Super. Also, we started the day off with Sabrawat ki kachori.
Yes, and it is so good. I can't get over how good it is.
But for all of you to know, Anuja is an author of 14 books. She has managed to write 14 books in 13 years. Since 2012, you've been writing, or 2013?
13.
So in 12 years, she's managed to write 14 books. That means she writes pretty much one book, more than a book a year, which is crazy. And the kind of depth that your books have is beyond mind-blowing for me. We'll get into the topic straight away. And today we want to talk about probably the star of the story, the greatest epic on this planet, the Mahabharata. And the star, obviously, everybody knows is Arjuna. Anuja, where do you start by drawing a character sketch of Arjuna, and how does his life begin?
Okay. So I'll just start with how I met him. That's the best place to start.
Amazing.
I've known Arjuna all my life, and I've loved him. I love him, and I will go on loving him forever because seriously, he's amazing. When I must have this. He's part of my earliest memories because when I first encountered him, in between the pages of an Amar Chitrakatha book, They describe him, right? It's such a momentous occasion, his birth. So much effort goes in, and when he's finally born, the gods show up and they rain down flowers on him, and they say this is the greatest warrior the world will ever see. And he had my heart right there. Because unlike most people, I tend to root for the guy who's going to win, because that way I don't get my heart broken. Like Rafa Nadal crashes out of the French Open, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
So Arjuna, he's going to win. He's invincible. That's why I loved him to start with. But over the years, you discover there are so many layers to this amazing warrior. I was so inspired by his hard work, his dedication. He didn't take his natural, God-given talent for granted. He worked hard every single day of his life. That kind of dedication, commitment to being the best was something that inspired me hugely. Because I haven't achieved even a tiny amount of what he achieved, right? And yet, when you're inspired by him, you produce 14 books. It's inevitable. It's a lovely byproduct of being in love with him. And another thing I love about him, people accuse him of being arrogant. I love it, because what's a man without his flaws? Who has patience for a perfect dude? So I love his arrogance, his commitment to excellence. But more than that, he could have had the throne if he'd wanted, because he was easily the greatest warrior.
Yeah.
Some would argue that it was Bhima, but no, the epic makes it clear that Arjuna was the only one who was undefeated in battle, always. So we have this history of sons murdering their fathers, fathers killing their sons, brothers killing each other, all for a throne. But Arjuna was above that, because he aspired to be better than that. And he was a kind person, very compassionate. He was the rescuer of women, children, anyone of any status, from the lowest to the gods. He would always help if they asked him. He never turned anyone down. Karna, everyone talks about his generosity, blah, blah, but they don't mention that Arjuna was also a very generous, kind person. I think, so now I love him even more, because I think he's that rare guy who moderates his strength with kindness and compassion. So he's my dream guy. He's never disappointed me. He's a gift which keeps on giving. So I'm so delighted that, I started my career with him. It's my love letter to him. And he's been such an integral part of my life. And I really love him to pieces. It's that simple.
Wow, what an introduction. I started reading this book and I got into a rabbit hole of story and then a backstory after a backstory. And that also, according to you, is how Ved Vyasa wrote Mahabharata, right? Maybe start with talking about Ved Vyasa a little bit and the kind of epic that he's written that still stays on thousands of years later. And then touch upon how and when was Arjuna born, and then we can go from there.
Okay, so Vedavyasa is a legend. He's the greatest storyteller this world has seen, in my opinion. Everyone else is a distant second, because Vedavyasa's Mahabharata is unbeatable. And the book is dedicated to Vedavyasa, because he truly is a legend. And I love that the Mahabharata is so great, because so much hard work and so much heart and soul is captured within these stories. That's the beauty of the Mahabharata, and I adore that it's fathomless. You can never claim that you know everything there is to know about the Mahabharata, even if, like me, you've been obsessed with it all your life. Entire lifetimes aren't enough to, truly know everything the Mahabharata has to offer. And that's beautiful, because it's a story with no ending. It's a beautiful story that has no ending. You can explore it at different points in your life, and every time you will learn something new. And for me personally, there's a very intimate connection. And it's given me, it served like a sort of Google map for me. To help me make my peace with the past, to navigate the present, and to shape a better future for myself. That is the beauty of the Mahabharata, not just for me, but for everyone who engages with it. And as I mentioned, Arjuna is my favorite. And Arjuna was born for a very special purpose. Now, Krishna took an avatar to make the events of the Mahabharata happened, because there was destiny's design at work here. You had to have this war that was there to demarcate between two ages, the Dwapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. So this was the war on the crack of the ages, and so much merit was accrued. So many good deeds were done. So many acts of valor, heroism, kindness, and love were perpetuated, that it is the foundation on which Kali Yuga is built. So even if our world is dark and depressing, there's always hope, because there's a foundation of great love, courage, sacrifice, and bravery that went into it, thanks to the events of the Mahabharata. And Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. But Krishna and Arjuna, meanwhile, is an incarnation of Nara, two ancient rishis, Nara and Narayana. So that's why this friendship between Krishna and Arjuna, this bromance, it is the spine of the Mahabharata. It's a beautiful, beautiful relationship of two people who've had each other's backs over the ages.
Is there a backstory of Nar? Because Narayana, everybody knows, is Vishnu.
Yes.
What is the backstory of Nar?
They say one is the first man, one is consciousness. How do you know you exist if someone isn't conscious of your existence? So that's Nara and Narayana.
Okay,
so in ancient pictures, they would depict the two of them seated under a tree, and Narayana would have his knee resting on Nara's thigh. And they say when Shiva was devastated after the passing of Shakti, his wife, in his grief, he was running mad. He was running amok, destroying so much. And when he saw these two peaceful friends under a tree, they say he hurled his trident at Narayana. And the thing about Vishnu, Narayana, is that he's such a devotee of Shiva, he will accept anything Shiva tosses at him, whether it's a blessing, whether it's a curse, whether it's the trident. So he refused to defend himself, but Nara used his ascetic merit to stop that trident. That is the power of friendship, and he stopped the destroyer's trident. That is the power of friendship, it's beautifully expressed. And even in the Mahabharata, there's a beautiful scene where Krishna takes an oath. He says, I will not lift a weapon. I will not participate actively in this war. I will be Arjuna's charioteer. But when Arjuna took the oath to slay Jayadratha by sunset, Krishna, for the first time, the omniscient Krishna, he experienced very human insecurity. He was afraid for his friend. So he called his charioteer Daruka, and he said, tomorrow you prepare my chariot, load all my weapons. If you hear the Rishabha note, that's the bull note. He said, if you hear that on my conch, bring the chariot into battle. I will destroy the world. A world without my friend will not be allowed to survive. So that is the measure of his love for Arjuna. Krishna is truth. He will never go back on his word, and yet he was willing to do it for Arjuna. So their friendship is the lifeblood of the Mahabharata. And so Krishna was born for a purpose, to make the events happen of this great war. And Arjuna was born to assist him, because the friends always do these things together. So Arjuna was born for this, for friendship more than anything else. Not to be the architect of a war, to be a weapon of mass destruction. No, he was that, yes. But underlying all that is a spirit of friendship and kinship. And that is why Arjuna was born as Indra's son, the third son of Pandu and Kunti, very special baby. And to celebrate the intent with which he was born, to fulfill all these great designs.
Can you bring this closer to you? Just to close. Yeah, sorry. Yes, please continue. Yeah.
So that's why the gods celebrated his birth, because it was, even his birth was an act of, friendship and love. And, it was a hint of great events to come.
It's beautifully how you've put Mahabharata. I've never seen it in that light, that it's a story of friendship. That's the last thing people would think about, because with all the controversial things that happen during the story, people talk about that it's a family affair and it's a story of two families and, one big family fighting one another. But I'm amazed by how you put it there. Anuja, talk a little bit about Arjuna's birth is done now, he's born, and then he has his 4 brothers, right? So everybody knows who the 4 Pandavas, the other Pandavas were. And now they're grown up. They've been living in the forest with Pandu and Kunti, right? For a while. After that, Pandu and Kunti die. Madri die. for the curse that Pandu received. From there, the boys, teenage boys, all of them were teenage boys, or the older ones were teenage?
Yeah, the older ones
Were teenage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they go to Hastinapur,
Hastinapura.
right? And let's start from there. What happens then?
No, they weren't even teenagers at that time. They had very little time with Pandu. So I'm not sure about the age, but the thing to understand about the Pandavas and in general and Arjuna in particular, people have this impression that they were born with this large silver spoon in their mouth. That's not seen. It's true to an extent because they are royalty that comes with a set of perks and privileges. But the thing is, they suffered a lot from the beginning. It was always rough sailing for them. Because see, all the to achieve anything in life, you have to. The epic makes it clear that you have to struggle first.
Yeah.
Nothing is ever handed on a platter. You might claim divine origins, everything, but their struggle was extremely human. So to lose their father, and for the twins, they lost their mother in one stroke.
Nakula and Sahadev, right?
Yes, Nakula and Sahadeva lose their mother, and it's a very, very painful thing for all of them. So you have this trauma early in your life, and you go back to the kingdom where, on the one hand, yes, Bhishma and Drona loved them, yes, but there was so much hostility. You go from the peaceful environment of the forest, and you enter the viper's nest, and you have attempts to kill you. There were actual attempts on the lives of the Pandavas. At various points, you have the burning of the Lak palace at Varanavata, and they were on the run. They had to beg for alms, go from house to house and eat what they get. And there's this very moving story where they talk about how Bhima has this huge appetite as the son of the wind god. And whatever they get, they'll divide it in half and give one half to him, and it's never enough. So they knew hunger, they knew poverty, they wore rags, they had to live on the hospitality of strangers. And yet, they lived their lives with grace. Wherever they went, they made the world a better place by helping everyone with their natural talents, which they never stopped working on. You keep building on that. And I think that's one of the very inspiring things about the Pandavas. Of course, people point their fingers and say, to escape that burning palace, 6 innocent lives were sacrificed. That's the thing about the Mahabharata. They are very, very human. They inhabit a grey realm, I never look at it in terms of right and wrong as far as possible. It just is. They did what they had to survive, because destiny had plans for them. So it's true that 6 innocent lives were lost to save their own. So that is the thing about the Mahabharata. It doesn't shy away from the darkness in life itself and in human nature. And these boys were heroes because they plunged into the depths of darkness while also making the world a brighter place by their deeds.
Yeah, and I totally second that. I believe, like, for what all happened during the Mahabharata, there was no black or white. There is always this gray area where also, the Dharm Raj Yudhishthir also makes some very foolish decisions that turn out to be devastating for a family, for an entire clan. But yeah, so the teenage boys go to Hastinapur, and Bhishma wants to have a guru for them. That's where the real story of the great student, and that's also the first chapter in your book. By the way, guys, Arjuna, that's the book. You gotta read this mind-blowing stuff. You think you know a little bit about Arjuna, but trust me, when you start reading this, it will blow your mind. Talk about the third chapter in your book. It says mentor extraordinaire, and we're talking about Guru Dronacharya here. Oh, sorry. I think I'll go a little bit back because I made a note about a rishi called Swetaketu.
Yeah.
You've got to tell the story of Swetaketu. It's so interesting. And then we go back there. So, yeah.
See, Swetaketu's story is fascinating because now I think we all have a very traditional mindset, despite our liberal progressive values, about what is right and what is wrong, especially in the realm of desire. which is policed like no other realm. Okay, people judge you for stuffing your face with chocolate and having obesity issues, but they are much harder in the realm of desire. So the Mahabharata, the interesting thing is, the Mahabharata doesn't shy away from depicting desire in all its unvarnished glory. So now Pandu, as we know, was unable to father children. But he's not a regular dude who can just let it go. You know,
Yeah.
he's the heir to a dynasty, and the guy wants to make sure that his that he has sons to carry on his good name, all that
Yeah,
stuff. The
yeah.
ancients, which
Yeah,
they prioritize.
the bloodline has to go
Yeah.
on.
And so he's trying to convince his wife. They had a practice in those days called Niyoga, a fascinating practice, as per which a man who's unable to bear sons, because that was considered a man's duty that he should bring forth sons and daughters, but mainly sons.
Yeah.
So if you're unable to do that, it is okay for your wife to bear children for someone who's your social equal or someone who ranks higher than you. And since these are highborn Kshatriyas, the options are very limited. So you have your highborn Kshatriyas, you have the Brahmins, and you have the gods. So Pandu is trying to convince Kunti to choose someone. He's a very progressive guy. He says, why don't you make the choice and why don't you bear sons for me? I will claim paternity. I will give them my name. And Kunti refuses because women were raised to have a certain set of values. And she said, even in my thoughts, I will not entertain a man. And she said all those things which noble, virtuous women are expected to say. And to convince her, Pandu tells us the story of Shvetaketu. And he says in ancient times, it was desire was not so strictly governed, within the realms of, within the confines of marriage. So he said in ancient times, people felt free to take as many lovers as they pleased. Women were very, open about indulging their desire. And he said it was very par for the course for a woman to have as many lovers as she pleases before she was married, after she was married, it didn't matter. And he mentions that there was a rishi called Shvetaketu who once saw his mum take a man's hand in the presence of his father and lead him away because his mum desired this man. And we're discussing deep-seated Oedipal issues here. So Shvetaketu was horrified, and it was he who framed these rules that said that a woman should stay faithful unto her spouse alone and bear him sons, or she will incur sin.
But what was his authority to state these rules like?
Now, it's
Was he a-
believed that these rishis accrue ascetic merit because they follow a certain lifestyle of sacrifice, which gives their words power. Words always have power, but these rishis had the power to weaponize these words. But the thing is, when you utter these words and it goes into effect, your ascetic merit is depleted. Which means you should think before, uttering words. It's a lesson for all of us. But the thing is, his words did have effect. So, but Pandu's point of view over here is that these things are cyclical, So, what's right and wrong keeps changing. What's right today will be wrong tomorrow. What's wrong today will be right tomorrow. So, who decides? Who decides? That's Pandu's point. And that's the beauty of the Mahabharata. That it's relevant to this day, that we are still policing desire. We are still haven't figured out whether it's okay to be in a polyamorous relationship, but we are learning to accept the things we don't understand. And that's always a good thing. So it's a fascinating story. There are many equivalent stories, but I'll save that for another day.
Super. So Shvetaketu, this was one fascinating backstory that I had. I read and I loved it. I had no idea it was there. Okay, so then Kunti has kids with the gods, and Indra, the king of the gods, Devas, has Arjun as his son. Then we go to Hastinapur, and then we start with one of the finest teachers that this country has and probably the world has ever seen enter the story, Dronacharya. But before Dronacharya's role and impact in Arjuna's life, which was huge, I want you to talk about Dronacharya's birth and because that's another crazy story I read in the book.
No, No, so Dronacharya, it's not just Dronacharya. If you look at all these characters in the epics, their births are extremely unconventional. So again, this is a way of saying that back then, everyone's lifespan was limited, and people were actually concerned. Today we are having the opposite problem: population explosions happening. Back then, they were trying to perpetuate the species, which meant that they had a very relaxed approach to childbirth and childbearing and the whole business of procreation. So with the Dronacharya, again they say that his dad was also a revered rishi, and he wasn't born in a conventional manner, in the sense that his father spotted this apsara. Her name was Girtachi, I think.
Yeah.
So Girtachi walks past, and this sage releases his semen, and he gathers it in a pot. And from this pot, Dronacharya was born. So I think I think it's a way for the sages to say, you know what, we don't need women. We can just go ahead and bring forth children. So maybe they were a little jealous out there. So who the hell knows? But the point is, don't look too closely at the origins of mighty rivers. Because they are beyond your ability to comprehend. That's the takeaway. I try not to bring a moralistic lens all the time about why, the intent behind why they wrote these stories. And today everyone insists on logic and rationale. Some things will always be beyond the reach of logic and rationale and our so-called laws of civilization. So it's okay. You don't have to, get freaked out about the things you don't understand. But the point is, Dronacharya is quite the character. He was one of the major players in the epic. Highly flawed, but a very, very remarkable man at the end of the day.
Like all of them, actually.
Like all of them.
And also about the kind of stories that were written, I think that reflects the open-mindedness and the freedom of expression that they had back then. Today, it would be blasphemous to write something like that and even talk about it.
Yes.
Right? In this so-called modern times. But I think our ancestors were far more modern and open-minded than we are. Why do you think that is, on a tangential discussion, why do you think that has happened to India?
No, see, we focus so much on the evolution of the species. But, in this case, at least, I think it was a tougher world to survive in back then, They were more subject to the elements. They didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have the benefits of science and technology. But the interesting thing is they did more with so much less.
No, but what I want to ask is like the kind of stories they have, like for example the Shwetaketu story, Niyoga's practice, and the birth of writing this kind of stuff. It's written in the epic, right? So they must be really open-minded to discuss this in open. I was listening to one of your talks. So you have a series online on YouTube about Mahabharata with Anuja, right? I was listening to that series as a process of my preparation for the podcast. And you talk about Ved Vyasa's, how this story of Mahabharata, which was told to Devas earlier, came into being and was heard by the humans, right? So, and it was heard for the first time by Janmajaya.
Yeah.
Janmajaya.
During the Yaga.
During the Yaga, and it went on for 12 years.
Yes.
And this was recited by Vaishampayan.
Yes.
Right? So I've done my homework then.
Yes.
So Vaishampayan narrated this story for 12 years to talk about such kind of tales in that time in such an open manner. You have to have an audience that is open as well, which is not the case today. And that was the ancient India back then. What has happened over time to us that we are so conservative in our thinking and mindset, and if we have a frown on our head once we talk about things like these. What do you think? It's a tangential question, but I just want to have it for the sake of discussion.
See, I would say that we are dwarves standing on the shoulders of giants, and we might have the benefits of science and technology, but in making our lives easier, it has also made our lives tougher, because we've gotten used to having everything at our fingertips, and anything worth having will not be obtained with a snap of a finger. We might like that, but it's not going to happen. And that is the lesson of the Mahabharata, because anything worth having, it takes time and effort, commitment, dedication, discipline, hard work. These are not just corporate buzzwords. These are words you need to embody in your life. You need to know the value of things. And it's not about price tags, and it's not about wearing a fancy watch and, trying to emulate the lifestyles of the glitterati. You have to know the true value of things, the things worth having, the things that nourish your heart and soul. Only that's worth having. So whether it's a relationship, whether it's an artistic project, whether it's a personal, professional thing, you need to give that much of yourself to reap the benefits of it. And that is something most of us are commitment phobic. We don't want to, put in that kind of effort which will drain you. It empties you out, it hollows you out, but it makes you a receptacle for something so much richer and more, and something deeply fulfilling. So that is the kind of, the epic challenges you. You want the good things in life, then be worthy of it.
Yeah, and also be open to listening to the bad things.
And when you put in that much hard work, discipline and everything, it shapes your character also. You realize that love matters at the end of the day. It's not just cheesy, cliched lines to say that kindness matters, love matters, compassion matters. Because when you look back in your life, it's not going to be about that time in the 5-star resort or that first class holiday you enjoyed or that piece of jewelry. No, it will come down to the people who were kind, who were nice to you when you needed it. Those will be the bright spots in your life.
I agree.
So that's what makes life beautiful. That's the essence of life. Anything which doesn't have an agenda behind it, that is what has value. So, when you work hard, when you commit yourself to things, I think automatically your insides also become very beautiful. You have this open heart, this openness. You understand that you need not judge people. People do what they do because it makes sense to them. And it's not your place to be the judge, the jury, or the executioner.
Lovely. Coming back from the tangent, Dronacharya is born, introduced into the life of the Pandavas. A little bit backstory of Dronacharya is his bringing up, and maybe talk about that a little bit.
See, Dronacharya, what I like about that man is he didn't take the beaten path. Now, see, Brahmins were considered to be this bookish sort. We'll limit ourselves to studying and chanting the Vedas. We will do that. But he was different. He was cut from a different cloth. And again, there's a lesson there. People, even today, they say we are bound by the Varna, the caste system. But that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Because at no point in the history of Hinduism did these 4 castes alone exist. It's a Brahminical ideal. It was never the reality. The reality was more complicated. There were always people who refuse. People can't be put in pigeonholes and labeled and tagged and told this is what you should do. So people will follow their hearts. And Dronacharya is an example of that. Because, he was into being a warrior. He liked weapons. He had an aptitude and affinity for weapons lore. And he was a master. He was one of the best at what he did. And he followed on the footsteps of Parashurama, another very unconventional Brahmin. So when people say that you are bound by caste and the epics and Hinduism endorse it, it's not true.
Yeah.
Because you always find people who, the epics tell you to do what feels right to you.
Yeah.
And, no shame or harm will accrue to you. That's the point of it. So I love that about Drona, that he decided he's going to be a weapons master and he will find students worthy of him. But he also had a very petty streak to him. His see, now you have this beautiful bromance between Krishna and Arjuna. Drona and his friend Drupada, on the other hand, it's the very perfect quintessential example of a toxic friendship gone sour. So 2 boys grow up together, they're so close, and then it all goes to hell. Neither can forgive or forget. So you have the male ego in all its glory right there. So Drona, despite being a very wise very nice person. In some ways, he could hold a grudge. He knew how to get his revenge, and that laid the groundwork for a lot of unpleasantness. So much death, so much destruction. Drona lost his own life, and his son then felt the need to take revenge. It led to one of the ugliest, darkest chapters in the Mahabharata. This little toxic relationship Drona had with Drupada. So that's one of the... And another thing about Dronacharya was he wasn't an impartial teacher. And I know people will use that to, critique him very strongly, because teachers are expected to do their best by all their students. But whether it's mothers or whether it's teachers, we cannot have such impossible standards for them. He was a great teacher, but he was also a father. So, he did favor Ashwatthama over Arjuna. But the thing about Drona is he realized that even Arjuna, he knew how to work his way around his teacher's limitations. And Arjuna never stopped respecting Drona. Because Arjuna only saw him as a mode through which he's receiving instruction. So he was grateful for the instruction. He didn't let the other things bother him. The fact that Drona favored his son over him. Arjuna, it never bothered Arjuna. To the very end, he loved Drona, but Bhima always points these things out. He tells Arjuna, I don't know why you are so obsessed with your guru. He's partial. He likes money. It's true. Brahmins are told that they should practice poverty, blah, blah. Drona liked the good things in life. So, he went where the money went. So, but that's a simplistic way of looking at him. Drona is a fascinating character. Lots of issues with the guy, but one of the pillars of the Mahabharata, and rightfully so.
Yeah. Also, very briefly, how he obtained the weapons from Parshuram.
Yeah. So that was again a testament to the strength in Drona's character, because Drona did live in poverty for the longest time. He was your typical workaholic. All he was concerned with was weapons lore and his studies, and they were living below the poverty line, his wife and his son. And when Parashurama announced that he's giving away all his wealth, Drona went there, and Parashurama gives him two choices, because Drona was tardy. So it's about the early bird catching the worm, not very appetizing, but there's a moral there. You go late, you miss out. So Drona goes there, and Parashurama has given away all his wealth. All he has is his body and his weapons and the secret of their use. For Drona, it's like he didn't think he missed out at all. He's like, oh my goodness, this is like the cake, the icing on the cake and the cherry on top. Yes. Please give me your weapons. And he's happy. It's a moment of triumph for him when he gets these weapons. But when he returns, it's the high and low of existence. He goes from a high and he plummets to the bottom because people are making fun of his son, who's just been... children are cruel. They're not the sweet, innocent things we insist on pretending they are. They are feral. They're savage. So these children had bullied poor Ashwatthama, and they'd mixed a little powder with water and convinced him it's milk. And the poor boy was happy. It was a heartbreaking moment for him, and that set the tone for what would happen. A childish prank, and Drona became very committed to accruing wealth, and that's when he went to Drupada and everything went to hell, because Drupada refused to acknowledge him as an equal, let alone as a friend. So that's where their relationship truly became toxic.
Oh, amazing. I love it how you put it so simply and in the words of, I'd say, Gen Z, so easy. I think this podcast will relate to people of all ages. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to Arjuna. Now we are in the age where Arjun is learning from Dronacharya and acquiring knowledge from him about weaponry and everything. So how was Arjuna during his school days? If you would call the age of during his Gurukul, and what were some of the most interesting stories around that time?
So what set Arjuna apart from the very beginning was pure commitment to being the best. On the very first day, when Dronacharya had all his students assembled before him, he asked, at the end of your training, I will make sure you guys are the best of your generation, but what do I get in return? Who will give me what I ask for? And everyone is scared to commit because what if he asks for my life? What if he asks for my wife or something? So everyone's second thinking. Arjuna doesn't hesitate. He says, whatever you want, I will fulfill it. So right there, he has his guru's specialized attention. So despite Dronacharya's partiality to his son Ashwatthama, who's Duryodhana's friend, and Drona's wise, he knows that in future these two are going to clash, these two factions. So despite that, he did do his very best to make Arjuna the formidable warrior he eventually became. And even when Arjuna noticed that Drona is giving his son extra nuggets of information, because he'd give them a task, very cleverly done, he'd say, go fetch water from the river and come. All the other boys will be chatting and yakking and gossiping, catching up, playing around, and they'll take their time to come back, which is what most of us would do. If a teacher gives you an errand, you're like, yes, I'm outside the classroom, and you're out of there.
Yeah.
But Arjuna was different. He was so committed. He thought, okay, I'm missing out. He gave his son a wide-brimmed vessel.
No.
I have this narrow thing, and that guy goes ahead of me and he gets that extra knowledge. But he didn't get angry with his teacher. We'll all comment to our other friends.
He's
so
being partial and everything. Yeah.
I hate him. Arjuna never stopped respecting his teacher. He decided, I'll work my way around it. So he used the Varuna mantra to fill up his pot quickly and get back at the same time. And Drona also, he could have gotten angry, but he respected Arjuna's
He was
intensity.
impressed in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a very nice relationship. And one time Arjuna rescued Drona from a crocodile's jaw. Drona could have done it himself. But again, that was a lesson there. He said, see, what's the point of theoretical knowledge if you can't put it into practice? That's what makes Arjuna special. And of course, you know about the task where he hit the eye of the bird.
Yes.
And everyone saw everything around them, but Arjuna saw the eye of the bird alone. So there are many stories like this.
Also the one that about darkness.
Yes, that's another brilliant story where one of my favorites, because Dronacharya again gives that command. He says, make sure he never eats in the dark. Make sure there's always a lamp lit. Now, again, all the children, they will practice their lessons. All the boys, the Kauravas, the Pandavas, they practice, but they want to eat their dinner and rest and relax and unwind for the day. Arjuna was the first to go in, last to come out. That's the mark of excellence, the effort he put in. So he'd always come in last, and Drona noticed that. So he said, it'll be dusk soon and this guy is still practicing. Make sure there's a lamp lit always. And then there's this fortuitous gust of wind which puts out the light, and he keeps on eating in the dark, and he realizes, just think, if I could, rely on my other senses to hone my skill, to make my aim even deadlier than it is. And even then, when Drona heard him practicing in the dark, the twang of his bow, he came and blessed him, because he could not help but be impressed. And he also thought that it was a privilege to have a student like Arjuna.
Beautiful. Also, like for me, this story stands out by far than everything else, because the commitment of the son of Indra and a royal prince to have an incredible focus on honing his skills. You can't say that he was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Forget about a silver spoon. And also, in today's words, nepotism, being a nepo kid. Mm-hmm. So he kind of transcended all of that. And despite all of that happening around him, he was just like any other student who was so hungry to just gain knowledge, all that he could. So yeah, that story stands out for me. Can you also talk about how he obtained Brahmastra? That was during the time when he saved Dronacharya from the crocodile's mouth, right?
Yes.
He did not obtain Brahmastra, or did he learn how to use Brahmastra? What was that story?
See, the Brahmastra, now that's one story. And he also later gets the weapon from Shiva also. The Pasupatastra, all that is there. He gets weapons from all the gods. Yeah. But there's an entire chapter I've devoted to how Arjuna accrued his celestial weapons. Yeah. And he had the deadliest arsenal you can imagine. it started, the root for that lay in his childhood when he was Drona's pupil. And you saw the extent to which he went. When he rescued Drona from the crocodile, yes. But the thing is, Ashwatthama used that opportunity to get the Brahmastra himself.
Yes.
Though Drona himself knew that he hadn't proven his worth. But Drona could not say no, and that led to devastating consequences, of course. And it was a good thing Krishna was there to nullify that. But that came later. So the Arjuna, that was the first of the celestial weapons Arjuna got, and he had that hunger to get more and more. And later, when the Pandavas were sent into exile, after the infamous game of dice, Arjuna used that time very well to go serve the gods, to perform penances, and to win many, 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 many more celestial weapons. From, they say there are 33 crore devas in the pantheon, and he won weapons from all of them. That is, again, it takes that kind of effort. They did not simply hand it over to him. It was years and years and years spent performing penances. He didn't eat anything, he didn't drink anything. So great was the intensity of his effort, and he fought the enemies of the gods single-handedly, all by himself, and he covered himself with glory. But for him it was all in a day's work, I guess, because great things were expected of him, and he always delivered. So eventually he wrestled with Shiva, with the destroyer, and he won a weapon from Shiva as well. So Pasupatastra from Shiva. So the takeaway here is not, all the cool weapons he had, but the kind of sacrifice that he was willing to make sure that he's the, possessor of the deadliest arsenal in the three worlds. Back then, it wasn't just Earth. It was, Svarga, Naraka, as well as, Bhulok.
But also, if you have such great weapons and if you're such a great personality, you have enemies. So talk about his rivals a little bit.
There were many who hated him with a passion. Now, the thing is, the reason he had all these weapons, as I said, it was because he was worthy of it. Now, with Arjuna, the greatest thing about him was not just his strength, his talent. It was the restraint he showed. Because he never saw himself as a weapon of mass destruction. He didn't hurt people unnecessarily. As I mentioned, he was always a helpful character. Now you have guys like Karna. Now, Karna was his
very popular character these days. Everybody talks about Karna, and seen in a very good light. Also, sort of an anti-hero, but talk about Karna a little bit, because everybody's really interested in Karna's character.
See, Karna is quite the character, and he had this sibling rivalry going on with Arjuna, though neither of them saw it as sibling rivalry. They saw themselves as plain old foes.
Sword
I hate
enemies,
you,
right? Yeah.
You hate me. They took an instant dislike to each other, which is sad, because under a different set of circumstances, they had so much in common. Yeah. Karna was his big brother. It could have been a beautiful relationship, but Karna was... Now, there's a lot of discussion about why all the bad things that happened to Karna happened, but it's actually more simple than that. Karna was the son of Surya, and these boys are fighting for the Chandravamsa throne. So they are descendants of Chandra. Karna is the son of Surya. It is that simple. Karna...
Wow. I've never thought it like that. Yeah.
See, vast as the sky is, it cannot accommodate the sun and moon at the same time.
Beautiful.
Therefore, in the Ramayana, Rama belongs to the Surya Vamsa. And there, if you recall, Rama was destined to fulfill his purpose with Sugriva's help. Lots of people talk about the unfair manner in which Vali was killed, but it's a simple reason again. Vali was Indra's son, Sugriva was Surya's son, and Rama belonged to the Surya Vamsa clan. So it fell to scions of Surya Vamsa to help each other. So there, Indra's son got the short end of the stick. Here in the Mahabharata, there's always balance in the world of Puranas. So in the Itihasa world, balance is restored. Here, Indra's son gets to cover himself in glory. Whereas Surya's son, here he gets the short end of the stick, because a son of Surya can never sit on the throne Chandravamsa throne. So it comes down to that. It's that simple. So Karna, unfortunately, he was abandoned by his mother at birth. And that comes with the trauma, resentment, just knowing that somebody had abandoned him. And he had loving parents, but his heart was not there. He always had that Kshatriya blood in him. And he had such a hard time finding a teacher. So many rejected him because they thought he was a low-born Shudra. So it goes on and on like that, unfortunately. And he always feels that I could have been better than Arjuna. Everyone's raving about Arjuna, but I'm better. So, a bit of resentment and bitterness entered his otherwise noble heart. So, I feel that when you allow yourself to become jealous, you kind of do yourself an injustice. So Karna's actions, they had a lot of negative impact. At the end of the day, I cannot I try not to judge characters. I say that, but it's not true. I get a little judgmental here and there. And in Arjuna's case, I'm biased in his favor. So I cannot get over the fact that Karna was so mad that Draupadi rejected him. Even there, Draupadi looked during the Swayamvara, when Karna went and lifted and strung this great bow, which no one had managed so far, she looked at Krishna for approval because Krishna was her bestie and she never did anything without consulting him. And it was Krishna who shook his head. He said, he conveyed that she was meant for someone else. So she said no. And, she could have been kinder, but a woman is well within her rights to say no. And Karna took his revenge in the worst way possible. During the infamous Game of Dice, it was his suggestion that she be made their slave and disrobed. It was Karna who did that. I don't know how people justify that and say, oh, he's so misunderstood. No, that wasn't okay what he did. And the same way, he could not, he was deprived of his armor, his divine earrings by Indra. So he knew that he was vulnerable. He sensed that in the encounter between him and Arjuna will prevail. He sensed that, but he was so brave that he was willing to accept death with grace. He was unafraid. That's the greatness of Karna. But on the flip side, he took his revenge against Arjuna. He made sure he hit his brother where it hurt the most. He broke Arjuna's bow from behind. And he deprived Arjuna of something that was more precious to him than his own life. So, he had a hard life. He made some hard choices. So, he's a tragic hero. A hero, but a villain also.
Yeah, that's why I called him the anti-hero of the story. So, coming back to Arjuna, now Arjuna is a young fellow of a marriageable age. And he's going to get married. Who's the bride? Everybody knows how he wins Draupadi's hand. Tell me what about Draupadi? Everybody knows the story how they got married, but a little bit about Draupadi and her brother, Drishtadyumna.
Okay, so we'll start with Draupadi. Okay, so Draupadi was born to fulfill a very deadly intent. I mentioned the toxic relationship between Dronacharya and Drupada. Drupada had been humiliated by none other than Drona's star pupil Arjuna. So Drupada at that point, so he pretended to be gracious in defeat, but he decided, so you unleashed a weapon on me. I will use that same weapon against you. So that was Drupada's design. You created this, I will use the same weapon to destroy you. So Drupada decided to have children who will help him take revenge on Dronacharya. So even that intent was dark. So the famous fireborn twins of Panchala, Draupadi and her twin Drishtadyumna, they were born to fulfill the destroyer's purpose. You'll see Shiva's pattern here, the pattern of death and destruction. It's terrifying, but it's beautiful. So Drishtadyumna was this the pride and joy of Panchala, because he was such a handsome guy apparently and very, very, very talented, and Drona's disciple as well. And then you have Draupadi, who was born, to be the catalyst for the war that, heralded the dawn of a new age and the end of another. So Draupadi is a very, very powerful, important character, and her beauty was deathly. It was dangerous because no one could resist her beauty, and that led to a lot of terrifying events in the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
But the thing here is, Draupadi did not know that she was an instrument of destiny. As far as she's concerned, she was just a girl who wanted to fall in love, find the perfect guy, and she found that with Arjuna.
Yeah.
So for her, it's very simple. Flat out love at first sight. At that time, she didn't know he was Arjuna. He was clad in rags and dressed as a Brahmin, a very poor Brahmin, but she loved him. Because, love is always beyond external factors. So it was just to her heart reaching out to this great hero, and she loved Arjuna dearly. He was always the love of her life. Unfortunately, she had to marry his brothers as well. But in the end of the Mahabharata, Yudhishthira makes it clear that she always loved Arjuna more than the others. So she was this important person in Arjuna's life. But he had other wives, Before, he was married. He didn't marry Ulupi, but he fathered a son with her just to, because she begged him to.
So this was before he met Draupadi? No, right?
This was after
he met Draupadi.
After
But we'll
Draupadi.
go there. I want okay, sorry. So what I want to do is maybe we talk about Draupadi's role. Like, so you talk about Yaja and Upayaja in the story of Draupadi's birth. These were the sages.
Yes.
And they gave this some mantra to.
Yes.
Why don't you talk
a
about that?
sun-bearing mantra. So Drupada wanted children, as I said, and these two Brahmins could do these wish-fulfilling yagas. So they were summoned by Drupada, and he parted with a fortune to get them to, give him the means by which he could achieve his revenge. So this is also an unconventional birth, because the sacrificial flames yielded the oblation, and it had to be consumed by Drupada's consort. And at a very crucial moment, she said, "Give me a minute, let me go freshen up and look my best." And they said, "We don't need you."
Yeah.
And they tossed the oblation into the flames. And so from the flames, Drishtadyumna and Draupadi emerged.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story as well. And then of course Draupadi gets married to Arjun. All the brothers take Draupadi to Kunti. They say, "Oh, look, mom, what we've got." She said, "Whatever you got, divide it amongst yourself." And then they have a moral dilemma, but they say, "Okay, you're my elder brother. How can I be?" Arjun says that, "How can I be married before you?" So they all decide to marry her at once and consider her as her wife, which is crazy when you think about it happening now.
Yeah.
After that, they go to Hastinapur, and they get the Indraprastha,
Yes.
right? And the Kauravas get Hastinapur. They built a beautiful mahal there, but before the palace is built, Narada comes, and you talk about how Narada warned about their new wife Draupadi. So maybe throw a little bit of light on that.
The Mahabharata points out that for some men and women, life throws up, unconventional situations for you to grapple with. Then and today, a lot of people can't wrap their head around the fact that one woman had 5 husbands. But even then, Krishna assured Draupadi that no blame would attach to her. He said that this is not without precedent. Polyandry and polygamy were very common back in the day. So Krishna also makes it clear that sometimes women do the best they can in unforgiving situations. And you can also look at it another way. She had 5 husbands. She must have had an amazing sex life. So you can look at it any way you want. The point is that she was a very strong, lovely person, and life was very hard on her because she was forever judged about it. And the brothers, meanwhile, see, the thing here, the sad thing here is no one obtained her consent before this union, and that's tragic because it was supposed to be a Swayamvara. Yeah. And the epic also makes clear that sometimes consent is taken out of the equation, and women do the best they can. They do the best they can in punishing circumstances. So at that time, the brothers talked. They did return to Hastinapura, and it was decided that they'll get half the kingdom, and that the half of the kingdom was Kandavaprastha, a cursed land, barren land where nothing grew. But it was thanks to Krishna and Indra and the architect of the Devas, that something beautiful was created. Indraprastha was created. So they were happy there, and Narada paid a visit and he gave the brothers some advice, because it's very, very complicated when 5 brothers are sharing one wife. So Narada told them this story. He told them about Sunda and Upasunda. 2 Asura brothers who loved each other so much, another bromance out here, very close brothers, and they performed penances and won a boon. Both of them asked for immortality, and Brahma said, no, everything that's created must be destroyed, but I'll give you the next best thing. You will meet death only at each other's hands. And the brothers thought that's as good as immortality. I wouldn't harm a hair on his head. They thought that, but there's Indra being devious as usual. So he commissioned this project, and he sent Vishwakarma, the architect of the Devas, on a mission. So he gathered all that was precious and beautiful in the 3 worlds, everything that was beautiful, that was truthful, that had heart, and he fashioned this Apsara, this Apsara of extraordinary beauty, and she was named Tilotama. So Tilotama then sashays into the lives of these 2 brothers, and both fall madly in love with her. And from being 2 boys who were so close, who had each other's backs, in a split second they went to being rivals for this woman's affection, and they ended up killing each other. So Narada told them this very sobering story, and they said, okay, so how do we avoid this kind of patricidal situation? And Narada, fratricidal situation. And Narada gave some advice. He said, just have some ground rules established among you. Let her spend 1 year with each of the brothers, and the other brothers should not intrude on their private time together. And the brothers stuck to this, and everything was going smoothly. But Arjuna, as usual, someone approached him, a poor Brahmin approached him and asked him for help to retrieve his stolen cows. And Arjuna realized that his weapons were in Yudhishthira's room. And Draupadi and Yudhishthira were together. He knew what would happen if he breaks the terms. That's 13 years exile right there.
Yeah.
So, but he decided that his duty as a Kshatriya was to help someone who came to him. And he went into that room. He apologized, and Yudhishthira forgave him, of course. But he went into exile. And it wasn't bad at all. He had lots of fun adventures, had some romances. So he had himself a great time during exile.
I knew about the exile that he went with his brothers, but I did not know about the exile that he went for alone. So 14 years with his brothers and then 13 years by himself. That's 27 years of his life was in exile. In these 13 years, he also fathered other children. Talk about his time during the exile. Also, he had some experiences in the south of India where he met Hanumanji and all of that. So maybe talk about that a little bit as well. It's also 2 parts. Maybe his incidents where he met other people, and then incidents where he met like his future kids.
Yeah, so initially he was supposed to practice celibacy during this, but so he was living the sannyasi life. And Arjuna, whatever hardship he has, he endures. So he enjoyed that. He enjoyed doing the spending his time in prayer and meditation, and of course his archery practice. And he decided to visit all the pilgrim spots. Okay, and so he's doing in Bharatavarsha, as it was probably known then. So he's doing the rounds, and he had this very, he rescued damsels in distress, helped lift curses, had lots of adventures. But he met this woman called Naga princess called Ulupi, who'd recently been widowed, but she lost her heart to Arjuna. So while he entered the water to offer his prayers, she spirited him underwater into her kingdom. And she made preparations for him to finish his puja. And then she said, see, I'm very much in love with you. If you don't take me as a lover, I will lose my life. So Arjuna felt the chivalrous thing would be to indulge her. So they had a son together. The son's name was Aravan. And she mentioned that celibacy thing, it applies only to Draupadi. So the epic always makes it clear that smart women will find a way around all kinds of stumbling blocks.
Yeah.
So she persuaded him basically, and she let him go. She loved him enough to let him go.
Yeah.
That's the thing with Ulupi.
Yeah.
So Arjuna moves on. he continues his travels, and then he wound up in the northeast in
Right.
Manipura.
Yeah.
And there you have this beautiful princess called Chitrangada.
Yeah.
And her father said, see, Chitrangada is my heir. So any son you have with her, he belongs to Manipura.
Yes.
So if you can accept those terms, I will agree to a union between the two of you.
Yeah.
So Arjuna marries Chitrangada. This one's a proper romance where he likes her and she likes him. And they have this son, Babruvahana. And then he moves on, and there's yet another fortuitous encounter.
But you don't
waiting for
tell
him.
about that right now, about his encounter with Briduvana. But then we go to South India. And because we're going to come back to Briduvana later.
Babruvahana will return later. Yeah, but South India, yes. While he was there, he ended up, he reached that holy spot where Rama built the bridge of arrows to help the Vanara army reach.
Lovely story, yeah.
No, not a bridge of arrows, a bridge of
Stones,
stone,
yeah.
which was built by the Vanara engineering genius Nala. So he built this. Neela. So he built this, and he reached that spot, and he said, you know what? We mentioned that Arjuna is arrogant, and he was when people mentioned that Rama was the greatest archer of all time. Of course, his competitive instincts were stirred, and he said, "I heard he's the greatest archer of all time. Why didn't he just build a bridge of arrows?" And Hanuman gets very upset when people go after Rama. So he said, so you think you can do it? You think a bridge of arrows you build can bear the weight of the mighty Vanara army? I doubt the bridge will bear my weight alone. And he was disguised as this poor, infirm monkey. So Arjuna was immediately, and they had this little bet. It was decided that if Arjuna's bridge fails to hold up this aging monkey, then Arjuna will enter the flames. Whereas if Hanuman loses the bet, he will be Arjuna's slave. So these were the terms, and Arjuna has never lost. And so he builds his bridge, and the monkey just steps on it and it breaks. It happens again. And third time, Arjuna is preparing to enter the flames, and Vishnu takes the form of a little boy. He says, see, there was no referee, so this bet is not fair. Let me...
There's no witness. It doesn't...
Hanuman's messing with the designs of destiny out here. So Vishnu shows up as this little boy, and he says, I'll watch. Now let's do it again. And Arjuna immediately this time, he sets his ego aside, and he utters a prayer to Vishnu before he builds his bridge of arrows. And this time Hanuman, to his surprise, he's not able to break the bridge, and he transforms himself into the form he took when he made the leap across the ocean, and he jumps on the bridge, still nothing. And that's when both of them realize that they are in the presence of Mahavishnu, and it's a humbling moment for both of them, because even Hanuman was being quite the character here. He was being devious and villainous, but it comes from his love for Rama. And Arjuna, as you know, he loves Krishna, and both are avatars of Vishnu. So this was Vishnu telling his devotees, chill, dudes, chill. You have better things to do than get involved in petty squabbles over me. This is a lesson for all the devotees who say my God is greater than your God. So Vishnu is saying, don't do this crap. And he blesses both, but Hanuman's lost the bet. He's supposed to be Arjuna's slave. So Vishnu tells him, see, he doesn't want Hanuman to be enslaved. Nobody wants that, not even Arjuna. So they decide that Hanuman will perch on Arjuna's chariot, and during the battle, he will utter these war cries that terrify the enemies and take the fighting spirit out of them. So this was his way of, aiding the Pandava cause, because Krishna, the avatar of Vishnu, is on their side.
Right. Okay, so now he has another encounter waiting for him, another interesting chapter of his life where he has yet another wife. Over to you.
So after his exile, there was a very, very beautiful encounter waiting for him. The thing is, he loved Krishna, and he knew that Krishna had a sister called Subhadra. And Subhadra also knew all about Arjuna, because many Yadava princes also trained under Dronacharya, and they would all go and talk about how brilliant Arjuna is, how he's such a great guy, the coolest of them all, the baddest ass of them all. And she'd loved listening to stories about Arjuna. So she'd always had a crush on him, which became an infatuation, which was proper love. So she really, really loved him. And when Krishna came and said, come, you spend the last year of your exile with me. So he was happy. Krishna also knew that, there's this is a very fortuitous union. So Arjuna goes there, and he also listens to stories about Subhadra from Krishna. And the decision is made for him he falls in love with Subhadra. And Krishna tells him, very cleverly, he says, Swayamvara, you saw what happened to Karna. Arjuna immediately says, what nonsense. Of course, Subhadra will choose me in a Swayamvara. I'm not a loser like Karna. And Krishna says, be that as it may, it's best if you carry her away. Krishna is always the mischief maker. But Arjuna here, it's important to remember that he ascertained whether she was amenable to being carried away. And Krishna assured him that she was very much in love with him. So when he went to the shrine where Subhadra offered prayers, Subhadra was praying that she would be reunited with Arjuna. So he was also happy, and that's the thing to remember. Some people say, see, he grabbed a woman, abducted her. No, this was the Kshatriya way. We don't follow these traditions anymore. So I'm not telling the young boys out there listening to this to go and grab women, shove them into the cup. Please do not do that. That was a different world, and Arjuna knew that she loved him back. Okay?
Neither of you are Arjuna, so
yes,
don't
none
do
of you.
that.
Yes, exactly. Not all of us can aspire to that level of greatness.
Yeah.
So Arjuna carried away Subhadra, and of course Krishna's brother, her other brother Balarama, was furious, and Krishna had to go and play the peacemaker, and he said they are destined for each other. Now the tricky thing here is Balarama had promised Duryodhana Subhadra's hand, because Duryodhana and Bhima trained under Balarama in Gadda Yuddha. After they finished training with this is like doing your masters. They did their UG with Drona. Masters, they went off to Dwaraka and Balarama to learn Gadda Yuddha, the art of fighting with the mace. So at that time, Duryodhana had fallen in love with Subhadra. And he had Balarama's favorite student is Duryodhana. So he had promised her to Duryodhana. Krishna knew this. That's why he asked, Arjuna very silently to carry her away, because Balarama would have denied permission. So this was Krishna being his devious self, and Balarama was furious. And then Balarama said, let's go, let's show him the Yadu might. And Krishna sat and he said, Balarama said, what, you're not going to come with us? And Krishna said, Yadu might, I'd like to see one of you stop Arjuna in battle. Only Shiva is equal to that task. Can you pretend you are Shiva the destroyer? And that stopped Balarama in his tracks. And he said, fine, let him come back and ask for her hand formally. Let's have a wedding. So he did that very grudgingly. And that is how Arjuna won himself the beautiful Subhadra, who was the love of his life. And Duryodhana harbored this grudge against Arjuna for that. He already hated Arjuna, but now Duryodhana had that extra reason to hate him. And the child born to them, of course, was Abhimanyu.
Also Subhadra is the mother of this book, so yeah, it's a good time to promote the book as well.
Abhimanyu, yes. So that's beautiful. So this Abhimanyu carried in his veins the blood of the Yadus as well as the Kurus. So two noble bloodlines, and that is why many insist that it was not Arjuna but Abhimanyu who was the greatest warrior this world has seen. So it's a father versus son thing. And many like Bhishma insisted that it was Abhimanyu who was the superior warrior. So
between father
Arjuna,
and the son,
yes.
Really? Wow.
Yes. So some insisted that he's even better than Arjuna. That was, that's to Arjuna's credit. And Arjuna was so proud of Abhimanyu, his favorite son, Krishna's favorite nephew. So he's a very, very special character. And Krishna made it happen because the thing not many people know is that Abhimanyu is an incarnation of Chandra's son Varchas, the moon god's son, who took birth to, help perpetuate the Chandravamsa line.
Okay.
So, that was the terms, when Krishna agreed, when Vishnu agreed to take avatar as Krishna, the Devas approached Chandra. They said, we will all be participating in this epic war. You would have to contribute. Obviously, this is the Chandravamsa we are talking about. And Chandra, very reluctantly, he agreed to part with his son only for 16 years. He said, then my son must come back to me. As soon as, he has perpetuated the line, he should be returned to me. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But unfortunately, it led to so much heartbreak and tragedy for the Pandavas in general and Arjuna in particular. So this is a very beautiful story about how it happened.
Yeah, and you can read this entire story in the book Abhimanyu, which is the next book that I'm going to read. Coming back to Arjun, how many wives he had finally? I want to know that, and how many kids he fathered.
See, the ones we know of, the principal wives would be Draupadi
The
first.
legitimate wives that
Yes,
he would
the
have.
principal ones which we know of, that would be Draupadi, and then Ulupi was not a wife,
Okay.
but he had a son with her. The son was called Aravan, and he's a very interesting character in the Mahabharata.
And he's a Naga as well.
Yes. So he had an important role to play in the epic. And then you have Chitrangada, who was his wife, and their son was Babruvahana, who also had a very important role to play. We will get to that later.
Yeah.
And then he had one of the Upapandavas with Draupadi. He fathered a son with her. And of course, Abhimanyu, his favorite, he kind of eclipses all the other
All the
sons.
others, yeah.
All the Pandava sons, all the Kaurava sons. Abhimanyu is, in that generation, he was the superstar in any generation. So he had Abhimanyu with Subhadra.
Okay, so now the exile is over. Arjuna goes back, and they fast forward. They are playing the game of dice. They lose. They lose everything. With the incident that happens with Draupadi, and then they go to exile. Whatever happens in 13 years, that happens. But before that happens, he goes to obtain celestial weapons. And very briefly, if you can talk about his time in Swargloka.
Okay. So that's a fascinating period in Arjuna's life.
Because that's important.
Yes. So again, it talks of his commitment, his dedication, and the hardship he endured. If his brothers had it hard during the exile, Arjuna had it even harder, because he spent all the time performing austerities to win the favor of Shiva. And finally, it was Indra who appeared before him and took him to heaven. And he said, you will meet Shiva when it's time, but there's a ways to go before that. So while he was in heaven, he was taught, the interesting thing is, he was not just taught weapons lore. I mentioned already, he performed some services for the Devas, and he learned how to use all their weapons. And but he was also trained in the arts. Indra summoned this Gandharva to teach him everything he possibly could about music and dance. Okay, so this Arjuna became a very, very skilled dancer and musician as well. And he had the same commitment to music and dance also. Everything he didn't do it in any kind of half-assed way.
Like an ideal student.
Yes.
The kind of student you would dream of.
Yes.
Because any, whatever skill you want to teach, he's like into it completely. Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah.
Yes. So he, even that with single-minded focus, he became a great dancer, singer and musician. And Indra was very, very pleased with him because he destroyed the enemies of the Devas. And there was this huge party arranged for him. And the Apsaras were all dancing. And Arjuna was looking at Urvashi, believed to be the most beautiful of them all. And he was thinking about her origin story and how she was created from the thigh of Vishnu. And he was thinking, hey, wait, she is my ancestor Pururava's lover. So should I call, is she like my great-great-great-grandmom or something? So he's thinking all this because she looks amazing, by the way. No Botox, no plastic surgery, nothing. But she was the hottest of them all. So he's thinking, my God, she's so beautiful. And to think that she was my ancestor's lover. And Indra noticed him looking at this Apsara. And he asked Urvashi to, help the party along. He said, you go party with Arjuna. And Arjuna found himself in a very, very awkward spot because she's his ancestor. And she said, and so very politely, very awkwardly, he turns her down. And she says, nobody refuses the embrace of Urvashi. Dude, what the hell are you thinking? The laws you mortals are bound by, it doesn't apply to the Apsaras. And she said, you're being silly. But Arjuna had, he had this thing in his head that she's his great-great-great-grandmother. So he could not even think of being her lover. And they say, it's a cliche, but they say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So nor heaven a rage like love to hatred turned. So she cursed him. And she said, you know what, since
you called me mother?
Yeah.
Nobody calls me mother.
Grandmother, nobody does that.
Yeah.
So she's furious with him. And she says, your manhood is useless. So no, let it become useless, let it fall off.
Mm.
And Arjuna is horrified. He's getting castrated by curse over here. And he is horrified, and Indra bursts out laughing. He says, even sages and all those in control of their senses, they can't resist Urvashi. Not bad at all. And Arjuna thought the loss of his manhood is not a laughing matter. But Indra said, don't worry. It's a curse in this case will be a boon for you. In your 14th year of exile, where you're supposed to be incognito, it will help you. And Arjuna, he embraced it very matter-of-factly, and he wore his eunuch garbs with pride as well. He was a very great... he was known as Brihanala, and he taught music and dance to the princesses, and it was a very something he did very well. And they say many people's lives were touched by his art.
Okay, so very shortly, Anuja, I want to know, because everybody talks about the weapons that Arjuna had, and you already mentioned how he obtained them and the Pashupati Astra and everything. Shortly, can you talk about how he obtained Gandiv and the quiver?
Yes. So I mentioned that Balarama grudgingly agreed to this marriage between Subhadra and Arjuna, and Yudhishthira also gave permission. Now, after this marriage, Krishna and after the birth of Abhimanyu and everything, Krishna and Arjuna were hanging out and just doing their thing. They were walking and just chilling together. They were approached by a very strange Brahmin. Now, this Brahmin was none other than Agni. And Agni asked a boon of the two of them. And he said a certain king had been performing this sacrifice with loads and loads of ghee for years and years and years. So his vitality had been compromised, and he wanted to regain his vigor. And he had been told that he would have to consume Kandharvavana, a forest. And this forest was under the protection of Indra. So he asked for their help. He said, see, I will release my flames and you should prevent Indra from snuffing it out. And you also have to prevent all the animals in here from escaping. So Krishna and Arjuna agreed. But Arjuna, before he agreed, he said, see, I have a lot of celestial missiles at my disposal, but my bow is not strong enough to withstand their power. So could you help me get better weapons? Help me help you. So Agni immediately went to Varuna and he fetched the Gandiva and 2 quivers of inexhaustible arrows for Arjuna.
Why is the Gandiva so famous? Like, why is it so popular?
It was wrought by Brahma in another age, and it was going to be wielded by great men who fulfilled the designs of destiny. And the most famous owner of the Gandiva is Arjuna. Because Arjuna is inseparable from the Gandiva. It was an extension of him. He never went anywhere without it. And with these inexhaustible quivers, and Krishna was also given a mace and a conch, and they were given a beautiful chariot as well. A golden chariot, which Krishna, charioted very expertly during the war. So all these boys with toys.
Yes.
See, you're interested in that part. And of course, I love the story of the Gandiva, but it's interesting that boys with their toys.
No, I love talking about weapons, of course. Yeah. Okay, so that's how he obtains the quiver and the Gandiva. And then we move on to the 14th year of hiding.
Yes.
There Arjun is the teacher of Brihandala. No, sorry, he's Brihandala and he's the teacher of Uttara, right? And also the Uttara prince,
yes,
her
Prince
brother,
Uttara, yes.
Prince Uttara, he goes with him to defeat an entire army of Kauravas single-handedly, makes them unconscious, gets their clothes for Uttara's dolls and everything that happens. Then the exile is over. Fast forward, we're at Kurukshetra. The battle.
So this is where things get very dicey, and this is where you see Arjuna's greatness. Actually, a lot of people, they talk about this because at that, just at that starting line, Arjuna hesitated. He had everything he would need to win the war. He'd worked very, very hard for this all his life. He had the celestial weapons, which were second to none. He had Krishna as his charioteer. Everything was in place, but he asked Krishna to take him forward. He looks to examine the battle lines. And then he sees all those familiar faces on the other side. He sees Bhishma. his grandsire. As a little boy, he would clamber onto Bhishma's lap and call him father. And Bhishma would say, no, I'm not your father, grandsire. And Arjuna would shake his head and say, father. So, he sees the grandsire and he realizes, I'm supposed to kill him. I'm supposed to fight him. He sees Dronacharya, his beloved guru, whom he never looked at with anything other than love, affection, and respect. He's thinking, these are the people I have to fight. And he sees the entire Yadava army. He loves the Yadavas. Yes. He has so many friends there. But Krishna has committed the Yadava army to the Kauravas. He offered only himself. Duryodhana had chosen the army. So he sees all these friends, relatives, kinsmen, and he says no. He says no. He hesitates. He tells Krishna, give me a begging bowl. I will go beg. I do not want the kingdom. So a lot of people will see it as weakness, but that is the greatness of Arjuna, that he was not at all comfortable with the business of killing. He derived
Despite
no satisfaction.
The greatest and the most capable of all.
He was a killing machine.
Yeah.
And yet he hesitated, and it took all Krishna's powers of persuasion to convince him to do what he was born to do. So, you have to read the Bhagavad Gita for that, the song of the Gita, that's beautiful. But moving on, in Kurukshetra, many, many great deeds were performed. And at Kurukshetra, interestingly, in the early days, Bhishma he promised Duryodhana that he will kill 10,000 soldiers every day. He was decimating the Pandava army because he'd promised Duryodhana. And Arjuna, for the life of him, he could not bring himself to do the needful. All he would do was neutralize Bhishma. He refused to, go for his throat. And Krishna, at 2 points, he said, Arjuna, if you do not kill him, I will. Because he's going to end the battle today.
And sorry, I'm interjecting here again. Initially, you mentioned how Arjuna decided to have his chariot ready in case Krishna decided to have his chariot ready. So you mentioned that he was ready to pick up weapons and destroy the world for his friend. And this is the second case where he brings his Sudarshan
but
Chakra.
This was an empty threat.
Okay.
Krishna only was trying to galvanize his body.
Okay.
This was Krishna being Krishna.
Okay. Continue.
So, he didn't intend to break his oath. But Arjuna was very protective of Krishna. No, you can't go back on your word. So once more, he had to push Arjuna to do that. And now, the interesting thing is, the person who kept the Pandavas' hopes alive on the battlefield was Abhimanyu. Okay, because Abhimanyu was so good, and he had the reckless confidence of youth. Okay, so how children never overthink stuff. They don't overanalyze. They are in that moment. I have to do the needful. I will do it. So that was the thing with Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu really, really distinguished himself on the battlefield, and he earned praise from Bhishma himself, the commander of the Kaurava army. He says he's better than his father, hands down. Great as Arjuna is, Abhimanyu is greater. Just look at that boy go. So Abhimanyu performed such heroic feats of valor. And another beautiful thing with Abhimanyu was his kindness. He also had the idealism of youth. So if there's a defenseless enemy there, he will not fight him. He had Jayadratha in his power, at his mercy. But Jayadratha had no weapon. He let him go.
Had he killed Jayadratha,
he would have been spared himself.
Yes. Yeah.
So Abhimanyu, and he would also look out for his charioteer. A lot of Kshatriyas would treat their Saradhis as collateral damage, but you had to protect your charioteer to protect yourself. But some Kshatriyas would see them as disposable. Okay, this guy is killed, call me another charioteer. Abhimanyu was not like that. At one point, he risked his own life to save his Saradhi. So he was being heroic, he was being kind, and he was unstoppable in battle. So he was the one who kept the hopes of the Pandavas alive. And then there's this chapter, painful chapter, where Arjuna, with the help of Shikandi, who is Amba reborn. Just to give you a quick recap of that story, while looking for wives for Pandu, Bhishma had gone to this kingdom where there were 3 princesses, Amba, Ambika, Ambalika. Okay, and Amba, however, it was her Swayamvara, and she wanted to marry Shalya. Okay, Shalva. So she refused Bhishma. She said, see, you abducted me from my Swayamvara. I want to marry someone else. But that guy also rejected her because Bhishma had humiliated him. So poor Amba, in those days, if you don't have a husband, your lot is going to be difficult. So she vowed to destroy Bhishma. And she took birth as Drupada's daughter originally. So we have a trans character here. And then she exchanged genitalia with a yaksha. After years of penances and everything, a sympathetic yaksha helped her out and they exchanged genitalia, and she was known as Shikandi. But unlike Drupada's twins, the fireborn twins, Draupadi and Drishtadyumna, who were the pride and joy of the Panchala clan, nobody liked to talk about this trans character. Everyone felt, oh my God, she's going to bring destruction on us all because she'd sworn to kill Bhishma. So this character Shikandi, Krishna made sure she draped a sari over her armor. Bhishma refused to fight her. He said, I know she was originally a girl. So there's this very, very painful chapter for Arjuna where he has to take out the grandsire Bhishma, the commander, because Bhishma is doing too much damage instigated by Duryodhana, who kept accusing him of favoritism to the Pandavas. So at that point, Krishna also told Arjuna he must do his duty. So they did something dreadful. They asked Bhishma's help to kill Bhishma. And Bhishma told, I will not fight with somebody who's not of the same stature as me, and I will not fight a woman, even if she'd been a woman in her previous life. So he gives them the clue as to how they can kill him. So they seek the help of Shikandi. Now, Shikandi was the daughter of Drupada. Now, unlike the fireborn twins, Drishtadyumna and Draupadi, who were the pride and joy of Panchala, people did not talk much about Shikandi because originally born as a girl, before that, she had been Amba. Now, let me tell you a little bit about that. So, Bhishma had been looking for wives, suitable wives for his half-brother Vichitravirya. And he'd gone to this Swayamvara, and these three princesses were there, Ambika, Ambalika and Amba. Now, Ambika and Ambalika didn't mind being abducted by Bhishma, but Amba had an issue. She had chosen someone else. She had given herself to Shalva. So, she told her position to Bhishma. She said, see, I love another man. Do the right thing. Send me back. So Bhishma did let her go, but Shalva rejected her. Later, Vichitravirya also rejected her. Bhishma also rejected her because he had taken an oath to be celibate all his life. So poor Amba, after all this rejection, she decided Bhishma was to blame. She said, I will make sure you are dead, even if it takes me another lifetime to do it. And she enters the flames. And she is born as Drupada's daughter. But she goes into the forest and she performs penances. She meets a friendly, sympathetic yaksha who exchanges his genitalia with hers. So she's now a trans man. And, Krishna told them that she is key to killing Bhishma. So Shikandi was placed before Arjuna's chariot, and Krishna made her drape a sari over her armor, just to remind Bhishma, in case Bhishma needed reminding. But Bhishma knew that not only was she Drupada's daughter, but that she was Amba. So he refused to fight her, and Arjuna from behind, he released his arrows to take out the grandsire. And the grandsire was so proud of him. He said, see, only Arjuna's arrows are capable of penetrating this thick hide of mine. This Shikandi, Amba's arrows, they do no damage. So he was happy about that. So you have Bhishma taken out, and Drona takes command after that. Okay, and now this is where Drona gives Duryodhana a boon. And Duryodhana immediately asks him to capture Yudhishthira. He says, you capture Yudhishthira for me, we'll end the war. I'll make him play another game of dice. I'll send him into exile again. Let's end this. Okay. If I kill Yudhishthira, then Arjuna will kill me. So that's a lose-lose situation. This way I end the war and I keep the kingdom. So Drona agreed. And it took everything Arjuna and Abhimanyu had to protect Yudhishthira. And between father and son and Krishna, they were super successful. And Duryodhana was furious. And, he kept insulting Drona every single day in front of all the troops. So Drona had arranged his troops into complex formations, which Abhimanyu smashed.
The Chakravyuh? The famous Chakravyuh?
Before that.
Okay, that's before that.
There were other formations which Abhimanyu smashed.
Okay.
So Drona, he told Duryodhana, you've humiliated me in front of everyone. Now let me show you what this old man can do. His pride was at stake. He said, I will give you the life of a Maharatha. by sunset tomorrow. And believe me, the Pandavas will feel his loss. Now the Maharatha here, I told you, the person who was seriously a superstar on the battlefield was Abhimanyu. So this was who Drona was talking about.
Wow.
And it was a very devious, horrible plan which he devised. And it had its roots, once more in hatred. Another formidable enemy of Arjuna's. This time, he did not have Karna's heart. He was a cold-blooded villain, this Jayadratha. And to give you a little backstory, this was again Draupadi's beauty being very, very destructive. Jayadratha was the husband of the Kaurava's sister, Dushala. So he's a relative by marriage. And he met Draupadi when she was in exile in the forest. When she was alone at home, he tried to abduct her. And Arjuna and Bhima went after him. They rescued Draupadi. And Yudhishthira had told them to treat him kindly because he's a relative. But it was Bhima who shaved half his head.
Yeah.
So, and humiliated him, kicked him. So, Jayadratha decided to hurt the Pandavas badly. He performed penances to win a boon. And when Shiva appeared before him, he said, I must defeat the Pandavas in battle. And Shiva said, that's not possible. You can't do that. But you will never prevail over Arjuna. Krishna fights by his side, but you will prevail against the other 4 Pandavas exactly once.
Okay.
So Jayadratha had this boon, and I'm assuming Drona knew about it. Okay, he must have. So, he arranged the troops in the very complicated Chakravyuha formation. Now there were exactly 4 who knew how to penetrate this Chakravyuha. You have Krishna and Krishna's son Pradyumna. Pradyumna refused to fight with his father on the other side. So he actually abstained from the battlefield as far as I know. And then you have Arjuna and Abhimanyu. The thing is, of these 4, Abhimanyu did not know the art of making his way out.
Right.
So Drona arranged the troops in the Chakravyuha formation for the purpose of capturing Yudhishthira and the suicide squadron given to the Kauravas by Krishna and led by another enemy of the Pandavas. Okay, so he was. So you have this king who was defeated by Arjuna once. So he leads the suicide squadron. They are called the Samsaptakas.
Say that again.
So there was this king who had been defeated by Arjuna in battle once. And he decided to take this oath, the Samsaptaka oath, where they will commit suicide if they do not prevail in battle.
Okay.
So the Samsaptakas, the suicide squad, challenged Arjuna to battle. And they led him to the south of Kurukshetra, far away from the main fighting. So Arjuna has been neutralized, removed from the scene. So all the Pandavas have is Abhimanyu. So the Chakravyuha is destroying the army, drawing closer to Yudhishthira. And, so Yudhishthira asks Abhimanyu for help. And the thing here is Abhimanyu doesn't hesitate, not for a moment. He's young, he's idealistic. He says, let's go. He tells his charioteer, let's go. It's time to do my duty. His charioteer warns him. He says, they're asking too much from you. Think about it. He said, no, it's not the time to think. We can't keep looking to my father every time to rescue us. I'm here. Let's do our best. So they go in, and we know this how tragically it played out. This young boy almost smashed the Chakravyuha from within. But, foul means were used. It was Drona who gave the idea for killing Abhimanyu. He said the boy has to be disarmed. He cannot be disarmed in straight combat. So Karna broke his bow from behind, and his Saradi was killed. So he was immobilized and he was slaughtered.
Yeah.
And he was killed by Dushasana's son. Now again here there's a very tragic story. They say Abhimanyu and Duryodhana's son were in love, Lakshmana. They were in love with the same princess. Again this is a daughter of Balarama. Okay, so they were in love with the same princess, but Abhimanyu managed to win her hand with Ghatotkacha's help. So Duryodhana lost out on the love of his life to Arjuna. The same thing happened with his son. So there's hatred here, pure hatred here, and Abhimanyu killed Lakshmana in battle. So Duryodhana literally wanted his head on a plate. He insisted that he insulted his warriors, including Karna, Drona. So which is why they all used foul means to kill Abhimanyu. And it was Dushasana's son who smashed his head with a mace while he was, stumbling, just getting up. And then Arjuna takes revenge the next day. He swears to kill Jayadratha by sunset. Krishna helps him. And that's the turning point in the war. Because, Arjuna declares that with Arjuna gone, life has no meaning for him anymore. He said,
with Abhimanyu gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
because they say he took the light with him when he went. So Arjuna immediately says, it doesn't matter. The victory will be empty. All of them say the same thing, including Draupadi.
Yeah.
Draupadi also, though she had her own sons, the Upa-Pandavas, her favorite was Abhimanyu. When she was humiliated in the Sabha and when they disrobed her, she said, I don't need my husbands. Abhimanyu is enough. If I tell one word, Abhimanyu will avenge me. So even all of them were destroyed at that moment. They lost everything right there. So, that's the whole point, that war has no heroes, no victors. It's just large-scale devastation.
Okay, it still feels very emotionally charged. So now we lose Abhimanyu in the battle, and then Guru Drona gets killed as well by Shri Krishna's play of words with Ashwathama. And Drishtadyumna kills Guru Drona, right? He kills, he takes off his head. So Drona is dead now. Now Karna is the commander-in-chief of the army. But he can't use his Brahmastra when it is needed the most. So he uses it on Ghatotkacha previously because he was unstoppable.
The Vajra.
The Vajrastra, right? And then when he's trying to kill Arjun, his chariot gets stuck in, because he was again cursed by one more Rishi, right?
Yes.
We'll talk about that a little bit.
So these were all the pieces on the chessboard which Krishna had a hand in moving, and also destiny, of course. So Karna had been in the earliest days when Parashurama accepted him as a pupil, Karna had deceived him. But the thing is, Parashurama is also an avatar of Vishnu, and Karna had gone to him in the guise of a poor Brahmin.
Yeah.
And Parashurama had a policy where he'd taken only highborn Kshatriyas, which in one highborn Kshatriya that we know of, that is Bhishma, because Bhishma was Ganga's son.
Yes.
And he wouldn't have accepted Karna, but when Karna went as a Brahmin, he did accept him as a pupil. But for that deception, he ended up cursing Karna, and he said, you will forget the
art or the mantra.
He would have also won many celestial weapons from Parashurama. So he said, you'll forget the art of summoning these mantras when you need it the most. And it wasn't a rishi, it was a man, it was the owner of a cow.
Okay.
Karna, he's been cursed, right? And his guru threw him out.
Yes.
So poor guy is depressed. He's walking in a funk and he hears he thinks it's a wild animal, and he just releases an arrow absent-mindedly. He ends up killing a cow. He offers to replace it with an entire herd, but people had very close bonds with their cows, right? So this guy said, when you are helpless, you will also lose your life. Your chariot wheel will get caught and you'll be immobilized in battle. That's when you will die. So 2 curses back to back. And then Indra and Krishna also did their thing. Indra went and relieved him of his celestial armor, earrings. Yeah. And Krishna revealed the secret of his birth to him. And again, this is tribute to Karna's loyalty, that despite knowing what he did, he kind of stayed loyal to Duryodhana. And he also asked Krishna not to reveal the truth to Yudhishthira. So Karna and Arjuna hesitated to kill Karna despite everything, because blood recognizes its own. So, there was a certain lethargy on Arjuna's part. He had killed Jayadratha and Krishna had maneuvered the situation so that Karna ended up using his Vajra against Ghatotkacha. It was a gift from Indra, which Surya had convinced him to obtain in return for the celestial armor and earrings. But even then, Indra warned him. He said, I know why you want this Vajra, but remember that it's my weapon. It will not harm my own.
Yeah.
Be aware, be warned. And besides, the one you seek to kill, he's under the protection of Krishna. So Karna knew all these things. So poor Ghatotkacha was taken out after Abhimanyu. And Karna was vulnerable on the battlefield. And he was brave. He knew he was going towards certain death. But Arjuna took him out when Krishna reminded him. Remember who broke Abhimanyu's bow from behind? remember who suggested that Draupadi be disrobed. So Krishna was right there lighting the flames of his wrath, and Arjuna took out his own brother Karna. And after that, the battle took a very ugly turn after Bhishma was neutralized and after Abhimanyu's death. It from being a Dharma Yuddha where they fought with certain rules for fair combat, it started becoming a free for all. It got
became a little
uglier
dirty,
and
yeah.
uglier and uglier, and the ending is the ugliest of all. I'm not even talking about how Bhima smashed Duryodhana's thigh. It's not even about that. It's about the midnight massacre orchestrated by Ashwatthama, which is, the end of this whole toxic war within a war fought between Drona and Drupada.
Yeah.
Drona killed Drupada. Drona killed all of, a lot of Panchalas were slain by Drona, including Drishtadyumna's children. All his sons were killed. So Drishtadyumna had lost his father as well as his sons to Drona. So there was this, fury on his part against Drona. So when Drona, the lie you mentioned, which Krishna convinces Yudhishthira to utter, Bhima killed an elephant named Ashwatthama, and Yudhishthira told Drona, yes, Bhima's right. Ashwatthama, the elephant, has been killed. Yeah. So Drona laid down his weapons, and it was at this point that Drishtadyumna slew him. Even Arjuna criticized him for it, and Drishtadyumna paid a heavy, heavy price for it. Because Ashwatthama avenged his father by destroying what was left of the Pandava army. They were in the camp. The only people who survived the battlefield of Kurukshetra after that, it was only the Pandavas and, Satyaki, Krishna's buddy, who fought with the Pandavas. Only they survived. The rest were all killed on this side. All the sons of Draupadi, Shikandi was killed. Drishtadyumna was killed horribly by Ashwatthama. He literally kicked him to death. So the pride and joy of the Panchalas killed in this ignominious manner. So and Ashwatthama's rage wasn't quenched even then. He used this Brahmastra he'd been gifted by his dad, and he released it at the Pandavas, who had gone there to avenge the deaths of their sons. And Arjuna, to neutralize it, released the Brahmastra. And the gods told, what are you doing? You're going to destroy all of civilization. So Arjuna could resummon the Brahmastra, which Ashwatthama couldn't do because he was never worthy. But what he did was he directed it into the womb of Uttara, who is Abhimanyu's wife and who was pregnant with Abhimanyu's son, the scion of the Parikshit, who was destined to take the throne, Chandravamsa. So, Krishna, they say he personally intervened. When the baby was delivered, it was stillborn, and all the women started wailing. And it was Draupadi who said, Krishna promised the life of this child to us. His words can never be false. Dry your tears. Krishna will come through. So Krishna, it's a beautiful moment for those who accuse Krishna of devilry and, manipulative scheming. Krishna said, if I've always acted in the interests of Dharma, if I've stayed true to the truth, let this baby be restored to life. So it was a beautiful moment where this miracle was wrought, and he was the sole heir of the Kuru clan, because all the Kauravas had also been annihilated. So this was, in the end, there's a beautiful birth to indicate that life goes on. And there's beauty and miracles even in the midst of tragedy.
Yeah, lovely. And also the famous curse that's on Ashwatthama, that Krishna cursed him, that he'll be alive forever and suffer in death.
Yes.
Suffer in life. So that's the end of Kurukshetra war. What happens to Pandavas and Arjun after that?
The thing is, once their purpose...
Because we don't talk about what happens after the Kurukshetra. And that would be the end of the podcast as well.
So we always think when we take up an arduous task or whatever that it's over, it's done, now I can relax. But life will always throw something else at you, to test you. So the Pandavas, now they had to, the funny thing is, Duryodhana and the Kauravas, they were dead. It was game over. These guys had to deal with trauma, with all the grief, all the hurt.
PTSD
they had to
of the war.
Yes, PTSD. And they had to rebuild this kingdom that had been smashed. So much death, destruction. So they went about this process of rebuilding, and they tried to do the best to help the citizens. Yudhishthira was very committed to being a wise ruler. Arjuna committed himself to looking after the kingdom for his brother. He commanded the armies. Bhima was named the heir apparent. Sahadeva, the wise one, always assisted Yudhishthira. So they had their roles to play. But, when they had served for as long as they could, we see the destruction of Krishna's line, the Yadavas, a very tragic chapter where they kill each other. There's
Is
a
it there in the
massacre.
Mahabharata again?
Yes, it
Krishna's
happens in the
life?
Mahabharata. It's a very dark chapter again where they all kill each other because it's been prophesized. Krishna's son Shamba is involved in this. I discussed that story in Abhimanyu. It's a dark chapter because Gandhari would have cursed Krishna.
Yes.
She said, Krishna, you watched what happened to my family. I curse you, your family, you guys will destroy each other. So her words came true, and Krishna, he accepted it with equanimity. He said, yes, so it will be. So that is, Krishna being the very embodiment of looking triumph and defeat in the eye and treating it just the same. So, his entire family was killed before his eyes. His son Pradyumna, his grandson Aniruddha, everybody was slain because they got into an argument about Kurukshetra. Now, among the survivors, you have Kritavarma, who commanded the Yadava forces who fought with the Kauravas. And you have Satyaki, who fought on the Pandava side. They are the different clans of the Yadava tribe. So they got into an argument where Satyaki said, Kritavarma, what you did was cowardly. You assisted Ashwatthama in the midnight massacre. That was the most of all the disgusting things that happened in Kurukshetra. This was the worst. You killed defenseless people and they got into a fight and they ended up killing each other. Satyaki was slain and then Pradyumna ran to defend him. He was torn apart. His son Aniruddha. Krishna also slew so many of the Yadavas because he saw his son, grandson and best friend be killed in front of his eyes. So they say Krishna also destroyed so many people and he deliberately exposed the sole of his feet, which was the only part of him that was vulnerable to weapons. And even here there's a very interesting story. Remember how I mentioned that Rama was involved in the death of Vali? Many people say Vali was unfairly killed because it was Sugriva and Vali who were engaged in combat and Lord Rama interfered. Now, Vali's wife Tara, a very wise, beautiful soul, Vali forgave Lord Rama. He said he was a great soul, Mahatma. He said, it is an honor for me to die at your hand. I go in peace. He accepted his death with grace, but Tara wouldn't. She said, my husband's a great man. He will accept what happened to him. I will not let an injustice go unpunished. It will be my husband's hand that claims your life in your next avatar. So the hunter, Jara, there was a certain weapon which was delivered by Shamba, a Yadava prince, and Krishna's son by Jambavati. So when some sages, Vishwamitra and Narada, had visited Dwaraka, Shamba went before them. He was a prankster. He dressed himself as a pregnant woman. He said, guess the sex of my baby. They said, you will deliver, but it will be the weapon that destroys your clan. And he delivered a mace. And when it was presented to King Ugrasena, he said, smash it and throw it into the sea. So they did that, but the tip of the mace alone wasn't destroyed. That was swallowed by a fish. And the powder, it landed on the shores of Prabhasa and grass grew there. And it was in Prabhasa that this argument between the Yadava chieftains happened. And they plucked that grass which became weapons and they killed each other. Now this tip of the mace which was swallowed by a fish, it was found by a hunter named Jara and he used it to make an arrowhead. And when he saw Krishna's exposed soul, he released this arrow and he struck that mortal blow which would claim Krishna's life. But Krishna exposed his soul deliberately because his job was done and he returned to Vaikuntha.
Did he die before Arjun?
Before
Arjuna.
Before.
So Arjuna got to know that Krishna was
yes,
dead.
It broke his heart. Krishna's last message was to Arjuna, his bestie. So he sent his charioteer to carry word to Arjuna about what had happened. So Arjuna made that painful journey back and he wound up the affairs for the Yadavas. He placed Aniruddha's son. So Krishna's son is Pradyumna. Pradyumna's son is Aniruddha. Aniruddha's son is Vajra. He placed Vajra on the throne and he returned. But when he returned with the Yadava women and some of the survivors, they were attacked by bandits. And his infallible Gandiva faltered and his quiver ran out of arrows. But Arjuna being Arjuna, he realized that his time had come. He told Yudhishthira, Krishna is gone. We can't live in a world without Krishna. Let's go. So they also placed Parikshit, Abhimanyu's son and Arjuna's grandson on the throne, and they left on a pilgrimage. And it's a beautiful ending for all of them because they walked away. They decided to end it on their terms, and one by one, they all, as they were climbing this mountain, one by one, they all fell. And there was a final, it's a beautiful moment where they realize their flaws are mentioned at this point, and all of them accept that, okay, no one's a hero when they die. Everyone's human. So they embraced their mortality and they all, let go. And they say the beautiful thing about the story is, the epic makes it very clear that hero and villain alike, they had all fulfilled the designs of destiny. All of them had lived in truth and in dharma. They had performed the role allotted to them with courage. So whether it was Duryodhana, whoever the hell Karna, they were all reunited in heaven. So in Svarga, where all the differences, all the hatred they nursed, it was all behind them. What was left was peace.
How did Arjuna die?
So Arjuna, the first to fall was Draupadi. And when Bhima asked Yudhishthira why, because he loved Draupadi the most. She loved Arjuna the most, but Bhima loved Draupadi the most, and he could never say no to her. So Bhima asked why did she have to die? And Yudhishthira mentioned that she loved Arjuna more than the others. And the next to go is Sahadeva. His crime was, not crime, his shortcoming was pride in his wisdom. Nakula's turn, they said it was pride in his good looks. Very good looking boy. Arjuna's turn, it's arrogance. But Bhima said, he was right about to be arrogant. He was the best of them all. So Bhima was there defending his brother. And when he fell, he asked, what was my shortcoming? Gluttony. And Yudhishthira also was tested. But, there was, for that little lie he uttered, he had to endure the horror of seeing his brothers in hell before he was reunited with them in heaven. But Arjuna's ending, what I like about it is, some of us, we hold on, we cling to things that no longer have value simply out of habit. The beautiful thing about Arjuna and his brothers was that when it was time, they let go. There was so much to live for. Always, there is so much to live for, but it's not in your hands. And they accepted it with the same courage and grace with which they had lived their lives. So it's not a tragedy. At the end of it, at the end of all the chaos, at the end of all the devastation, there's peace. And peace is always worth fighting and dying for.
Wow. Wow. Anuja, and I am short of words by the kind of knowledge that you've shared with us. So that's the end of Arjuna, the hero of Mahabharata, and one of the greatest warriors that the planet has ever seen or would see. Thank you for coming here and sharing your this wonderful story with us. I'm still in the Kurukshetra and the end of all of that, but this is reality and I got to come back to it. For people, if they want to read more of your books, what kind of work you're doing, if you can share briefly about that, and also where can people find you?
So thank you. First of all, I really have to convey my gratitude to you, because any opportunity for me to revisit the Mahabharata is a blessing beyond measure. So I'm very, very grateful to you for giving me this opportunity to share the Mahabharata with my Arjuna with you. So I really, really enjoyed talking to you. And I really, seriously, I could spend days doing this, but thank you so much. And as for the my body of work, so mainly I write in the Indian mythology genre. And leaving Arjuna and Abhimanyu, I've also explored characters like Mohini and Shakti, Ganga, Kartikeya. And yes, mine is a revisionist take on these stories
Yeah.
because I feel it's important for the female perspective to be highlighted because it's
Yeah.
extremely male centric. Mythology at its heart is neutral, but sometimes there are vested interests where interpretation is concerned. So I feel you need to have a balanced voice out there, and nothing is above reform. There
Yeah.
are lots of problematic stories and principles that have been handled, and there's no harm in questioning
Yeah.
and retelling and reimagining and reinterpreting these stories. My latest book is The Wife and the Dancing Girl, so which again it looks at this very problematic dichotomy. When it comes to viewing women, people insist on seeing them as either the good girl, the perfect wife, or the wicked witch, and something which rhymes with it. So no woman in the entire history of time has entirely been one or the other. You find an infinite combination in what women are capable of being. So this story again, it examines the many faces of a woman through the perspective of a wife and the so-called other woman who's actually a lovely person and a dancer. And it's a beautiful love story, a love triangle.
So what did you say again? Sorry, the name of because I'm still lost in Arjuna. I'm so sorry. The maid and the dancing girl.
The wife and the dancing girl.
Right, guys. The wife and the dancing girl. But I'm also going to read Mohini the Enchantress, the son of Arjuna Abhimanyu, and also, of course, you've got to read this book. This is crazy, Arjuna. But there is another book that you've written that's about Shakti. That's on my list as well. And I've seen that I was reading watching one of your interviews where you say that you get into one story then you like one character and you like go into a rabbit hole on the story of that character. Then you write a book about that character. And that's how you go about writing your books, which is fascinating because the kind of and the speed of content that you're producing, I don't know, in the coming years, I think the shelves are going to be full of your books. I hope everybody reads them and sees the perspective that you have. I'm extremely, extremely thankful for you coming here. And you're also at the Jaipur Literature Festival. So if you guys want to watch, because if you're here, you'll watch her live. But if you're watching this episode later, you can find her session on the Jaipur Literature Festival YouTube channel. Yeah. And you should definitely do that to get to know more about Anuja and her books. Anuja, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Deepan. The pressure was entirely mine.
Thank you. Cheers.